Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Pageau. The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by Media Clip, Advertech Printing, and Independent Photo Imagers.
Hello again, and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Pageau, and today we're joined by Dave Stock, the owner of Team DSP and longtime sports photographer, volume photographer, and teacher and coach in the industry. Hi, Dave. How are you today?
Doing great. How are you, Gary?
Great. Now, you've been a fixture in the photography world for over 40 years and all various aspects in your career. How did you get started in photography, especially in sports photography?
Well, years ago, as a high school freshman running cross country, we had a very good team. We won a national championship. And as a result, the San Jose Mercury News was covering our events. One day, I took an interest in taking pictures, borrowed my dad's Argus C3 camera, which is an old rangefinder.
Sure.
Started taking pictures and went to the dark room at my high school and asked seniors if they would make some prints for me. And they gave me an answer, which we can't repeat. But they did allow me to borrow an enlarger and show me how to use it. So I was hooked once I was making prints in the darkroom. One day, the San Jose Mercury dude called up and said that they could not make it to the meet. He said, if you could give that camera to someone else, take a picture of you running in the race, make a print and get it downtown by 7 p.m., we'll give you $10. And back then, $10 would buy you, $1 would buy you 8 hamburgers.
Right.
A bag of burgers. So
you could buy the whole team, basically.
Yeah. So I had a picture in print. Photo of Dave Stock by Dave Stock, and that massaged my ego and got me some money, and that's how I started. And so I started shooting high school events. Pretty soon I was shooting track and football and baseball and basketball and selling them at $15 a picture back then, which was huge.
Yeah.
Selling pictures at school. As a junior, I was hired as the sports information photographer at the local junior college, and so that was outstanding. And I was.
Oh, you were still an athlete too, right?
Yeah. So I'd run my workouts really fast. It helped me run faster because I had to get over to the junior college. Took pictures there. Went home, did homework, made a bunch of prints in my bathroom in my home, and was contributing to Track and Field News and Runner's World. Went to college, studied it, and when I got out of college, I had a job waiting for me as a director of photography at Runner's World, which is one of 7 magazines. And I was there I was lead photographer and photo editor for all of those. And from there, I went to contributing to Sports Illustrated and NFL Properties and on and on. But that's how I got started.
Well, that's, it's funny because, most people know I, dabbled in running back in the day. Certainly didn't win a national championship with my team back in the day. But, I'm well aware of Runner's World. I probably saw some of your photos back in the day.
I suspect you did. I was the first director of photography there, so they created the position for me.
Awesome. So how long were you at? Well, it was back then. Was it Rodale Press? Was that who was the publisher back then?
That was before Rodale Press.
Oh,
I was World Publications with Bob Anderson being the owner in Mountain View.
Oh, okay.
And then he sold to Rodale several years later, and moved to the East Coast.
Talk a little bit about what you liked about sports photography, because a lot of people get into different photography for different reasons, right? And I think part of, what happened in your career was, sort of the explosion in sports photography overall. During that time period, cameras were getting better, lenses were getting faster, film was getting better, because we're talking film days, right? So, you were kind of riding that wave, if you will.
Well, I love sports. I love watching baseball and football, pro, and I was participating in sports as a distance runner, but also on the basketball team. So I enjoyed it from that level. And of course, being able to go down on the field and enjoy it more intimately than someone in the stands was very attractive. And then the challenge for me, is a physical challenge as well. When I shoot an NFL football game, back when I was able to do it, I outran everybody from end zone to end zone. I controlled my breathing and got the shot where other people couldn't even get there on time. So there's a very definitive physical aspect to it. Like, I was the USGA photographer at US Open several times. So again, you're running a long ways with heavy equipment, and physical conditioning is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
So that whole thing really appealed to me, and just the challenge of of trying to outthink everybody else, of trying to triangulate the movement of all the players and positioning yourself so you could get the touchdown catch, all of that appealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then being able to see your pictures in print was really cool too. I went down to a magazine rack after an NFL game, and my other photographer friends and myself, we would go through the magazines very quickly and see who had more pictures in print, and then the winner would not have to pay for pizza that night.
So talk about that. So you went to kind of a niche publication, running publication, and then you got into Sports Illustrated, which was the granddaddy of the time. And you had to probably demonstrate, clearly you could do more than just, running photography. You could do all, like you said, you had to do, football, which is very arduous, and the other sports. So how did they find you? Were you just constantly looking for the next opportunity, or were people finding you?
When I was at Runner's World, Sports Illustrated would call upon us from time to time when they wanted coverage or referral of a photographer for a road race, marathon, cross-country meet, track meet. And I usually refer that to myself. And so we do the photography, and that's the initial connection. And I've always been a goal setter, and I figured, aim high. If you fall short, you arrive somewhere, right? So my goal is to be, an elite sports photographer. And I thought, if all I do is distance running, I can't really claim to a title. I need to branch out a little bit. So I went to a workshop taught by the man who created Sports Illustrated, Mark Kaufman. He became one of my original mentors. And Peter Reed Miller, who's had over a couple hundred covers, is a legend in sports photography.
He is a legend, yep.
And they became my original mentors. They arranged my interview at Sports Illustrated. They told me I had to go out there, and eventually got me out there for an interview. I had an interview on a Friday. On Saturday, I was shooting Testaverde in Miami. And on Sunday, I was shooting Dan Marino in Miami. So that was my first weekend shooting for Sports Illustrated. It was... the whole thing was an out-of-body experience. I was 23 at the time, and it just kind of went from there. I was quickly picked up by NFL Properties, where and the 49ers. I was a 49er team photographer back when we were winning Super Bowls on a more regular basis. Actually, we haven't been doing it in a while. I then started shooting everyday baseball game in San Francisco and Oakland. I was shooting NCAA football every Saturday in Stanford or Cal. I was shooting Raiders and Niners on Sundays. So I kept quite busy in the Bay Area and occasionally traveling, doing those things.
And that's, a lot of time. You had practically no spare time. What was that like, just having any kind of personal life as a young guy in that area, thinking, you have no personal life?
Well, I had a real job, and the real job was doing commercial photography. So I was based in Monterey, California, where we do a lot of the growing of the various crops in the country. So I was doing annual reports for a wide range of companies, doing a lot of editorial and advertising work. I had my three main clients were hospitals, actually, in the Monterey area, doing their stuff. So that kept me busy, and I did have three kids, and I was involved in their lives as well, and a wife along with those. So and I was training hard for a long time as a distance runner. So yeah, I was busy.
So I just can imagine the discipline that took, though, to do hopefully all of those things well. Right, because usually most people have some gifts. So sort of probably the discipline of being a distance runner probably came into play on that. So let's talk a little bit about the 49ers period, because that's a period I think that as a Lions fan, I would love to have though that kind of experience, and hopefully we're going to experience that this year. That must have been an amazing experience, because you didn't know, obviously, when you signed on the team that they were going to have that sort of success in that time period. So what was that like, kind of having an insight into the locker room as you did? Well,
my first game photographing them came in 1982. I was added as a team photographer in 85. My duration as team photographer lasted one season. Wish went longer, but it was pretty intense. My first game as a 49er photographer was the game in which Jerry Rice made his first touchdown catch. So that was kind of cool to be there. But being able to have that kind of access, travel with the team, be at the workouts, be in the locker room, was really unique and really cool, and developed some relationships with players and guys who went on to be coaches in the NFL at that time. I continued with the team, though, in kind of an honorary capacity, because to re-sign Jerry, the explanation was they had to lay off one of the two team photographers, and I was the one. The other guy had been there forever, Michael Zagaris. He's still there, and he's incredible. I still received 3 photo credentials to every game through 96 when I moved out to the Dallas area. So I was there. I was contributing to the team, but I was also contributing to other magazines, to my agency, which was Focus West, and eventually became All Sport, and eventually became Getty. I was still part of the family, in essence, even though I didn't travel with the team. And I lost some of that special access along the way, but that's okay.
So let's talk a little bit. You mentioned the licensing thing, because that's kind of interesting. Because, I mean, I find it ironic that someone named Dave Stock got into licensing. I don't know if that was intentional or not. You got the whole stock photography thing going for you. Little pun there. How did you see that opportunity can you talk a little bit about that licensing business and how you saw that opportunity develop and then eventually have to evolve?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Photo retailers, energize your sales with ShareMe Chat, the proven texting platform. Using chat to text on your website keeps your customers connected and buying. See us at Pro and IPI to find out why dealers using ShareMe Chat close more sales without adding staff. Find out more at shareme.chat.
I was honored that they named the whole thing after me, so that was cool. I took a little side excursion for 4 years, and I sold securities and was licensed in stock as well. So the only thing I haven't done is raise, 4-legged animals at this point to do the hat trick in stock. But when I was with the Niners, I learned that it was illegal to sell pictures of NFL players without a license. And at that point, no one had a license to do high-end collectibles. And Joe Montana in particular encouraged me to seek a license. So I did, being young and naive and not realizing that the odds were totally against me. I put together a business plan and received the first ever license from NFL Properties to do high-end collectibles. We then branched into doing the 8x10 glossies. It was us and one other company that did that. So typically when players were signing 8x10s at trade shows, there's a pretty good chance that either I purchased the rights to the photo and printed it, or I actually took the photo. And they would say Pro Look on the bottom, which was the name of the company I created for that. I got the attention of Beckett Publications in Dallas. They did price guides and a bunch of magazines. Jim Beckett wanted me to head up this new licensing division in Dallas. And I said, well, I've got my own company I'm running here. And he said, well, if I buy your company, then I can bring you out here and have you run licensing. I said, well, if you want to do that, sure. So we did. So he bought Pro Look, moved me out to Dallas, and I was in charge of doing licensing with baseball, football, basketball, hockey, and NASCAR. Right. And we attempted to get licensing in each area, but basically to sell photos of any of those images, if you can see a registered trademark with 49ers, it'd be the SF on the helmet, the 3 stripes down the helmet, the stripes on the sleeves. Those are all registered trademarks with the NFL, and of course the NFL shield. Independent of that, you have to be licensed with the Players Association. So to use the player's likeness, if you can recognize his face or see the back of his uniform with his name, you have to be independently licensed to the Players Association. So you have to get those contracts, and you have to pay percentages to both on a monthly basis as you made sales, and it works that way with all the leagues. So that's kind of how licensing works. There are a tremendous number of people who sell pictures without licenses. The leagues rarely pursue people unless they're doing it on a big time basis, because there's so many out there and it's hard. Yeah. It's just not worth their time. But I always tried to do it right. And all the pictures that I've sold have been licensed.
Was the impetus for your move to Dallas was to work for Beckett?
Yes. Yeah. Beckett acquired out here. Now, what I didn't touch on was the stock photos used to be a huge thing back in the 70s. Oh, yeah. And you could take pictures of NFL games and you could send them to All Sport or Sports Illustrated would sell them out of their files as SI picture sales. That has disappeared because of the fact that Getty Images has basically acquired almost all their sideline rights to all the sports, and they hire young people willing to work for really cheap to take pictures.
Right.
And the technology has enabled a wide range of people to be able to get good images,
Right.
Even people with relatively limited experience. And so they're paying $100, $150 for a total buyout on a game, and then they're selling those pictures over and over again. So Peter Miller and I did a calculation years ago, and we said there used to be at least 100 guys in the country making six figures shooting sports, pro sports. 10 years ago, we figured that number had dropped to under 10. We're making 50,000 or less. That it has disappeared. So if you look at the sidelines of 49er game today, there's 30 guys with credentials. There used to be 250. They've cut way down on the number of people who are on the sidelines. And almost everyone there can't sell them to anyone except to a daily newspaper if they're working for them. But outside of that, you have to go through Getty. And I've got a bunch of my images, tens of thousands of them are in a coal mine somewhere in Pennsylvania, where they're stored underground at a place called Iron Mountain, where currently I can't get access to them because they shut the whole thing down in 2019 due to COVID. So it's kind of sad. I've got a bunch of good pictures in there that I'm not making any money from. And if they were being sold, I would be doing a 50-50 split and getting virtually nothing for them.
So just roll that back a little bit. So these are transparencies, right?
Yeah. Color slides.
And they've never been digitized.
Some have.
Yeah.
I don't know which ones, but largely no. So I have never digitized them. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So you've got like this whole bank of images from when you were, on the sidelines chasing balls around, and it's an asset that's not being utilized at all right now.
Basically, that's true. I just went to Getty yesterday and did a search for Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, and some other names where I know I have a bunch of images. None of them were mine, even though I know I think Getty has some of my images, but just trying to track what's happened because they went from All Sport to Getty to AP Wire Photo to another company. And so I'm not even sure who has my images now. I know that Getty was.
You don't. All you know is you don't.
Yeah, I know that I don't. I have the ones that didn't come out very well.
Yeah.
I got the outtakes because SI will go through and they'll take out all the best ones. You never get to see those unless they're in print, and then they send you back all the outs, and then you edit those and you send them to your various agents to see what you can get from that. What residual value, because they send back a lot of good stuff.
Yeah,
it's just to keep the best.
So after Beckett, what did you do after Beckett?
Jim Beckett, the guy who brought me there, had a heart attack and it changed the direction of the company. They no longer wanted to go into licensed products. So I became a salary they wanted to unload.
Yeah.
And so at one point I resigned and I found myself without a job, without a warm market, without much of my equipment left behind in California. And I'm in Dallas now with a decent sized mortgage. And I started coaching cross country and track for free, just to have something to do. And during that time, I shot a team picture of the local high school cross-country team at Marcus High School. It was a pain because I realized after making the commitment, I had to get a relationship with the lab, which I did not have. I had to figure out pricing, which I had not. I had to figure out how to do an order form. There's all these things that are,
And what was this time period? This
was 1998.
Okay.
So I went, crap, what have I got myself into? But now I've got a safe face. I can't tell these people I'm not going to do it. And I meet with them every day, twice a day for practice.
Right.
And I did the pictures and grossed 2,700 doing a cross country team. I thought, well, that felt good because I've had no income for a while now. Let's try it again. So I ended up doing some other work on that campus. And then I started doing work for other schools that visited that campus and saw my pictures on the wall. And it happened fairly quickly that I was doing a lot of TNI work. And actually the name TNI, as far as I know, came from a talk I did in Dallas in 2002. I called it Team and Individual Photography. People started calling it TNI as opposed to TNA. Don't get it confused.
Yeah.
And
that's a whole nother market.
It's another market I have not investigated. I had kind of a unique vision back then. The pictures that I had seen were largely done with on-camera strobe, everything on automatic. No 3 or 4 light setups, no digital graphics. Photoshop wasn't really kicking in yet. Digital cameras were just hitting the market. So my thought was if I could treat a photo shoot like I was on assignment for Sports Illustrated doing a feature shot, if I could light it nice, if I could take many pictures and choose the best, that parents would see a difference and would be willing to either pay more or at least a higher participation rate would result. And I was told by the veterans in the business at PMA and other places that I was screwing it up for everybody because I was setting the bar up there. There was no need to because our parents can tell the difference. And I thought, well, I think I'm right and you're wrong, but I'm 27 and you're 60 and been doing it for a while. I won't mention names, but you know the guys. Mm-hmm. And I think the time has proven that maybe my vision was a little better, because if you look at what volume photographers are turning out now, the innovation, the quality is very impressive. And we've reached a point where the traditional PPA market, the guys who have the danglies around their neck, of which I actually have a couple, who do portraits and weddings, actually appreciate some of our artistry. Yeah. Whereas back then we were the bottom of the food chain. Right. We're right there with, I don't know, forensic photographers and guys who go door to door with a horse and say, if you want your kid to jump on a pony, I'll sell you a print. Mm-hmm. You do have to do some real nice work to compete these days. Yeah. And I take a little credit, maybe turning that around.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, definitely were, like you said, that again, going back to what I was saying before about the timing, right? The timing was great for you and that you saw the opportunity and applied that. So what were those early days like? Because you didn't have Team DSP, you had DS, you had you, basically. Clearly you understood sports photography. Clearly understood, what athletes would like and what parents would like being a coach and an athlete yourself. But that there's a whole business side of it that you kind of had to create on your own.
Well, I suffered from a pretty healthy dose of naivety and arrogance because I thought, how tough is it to tell a kid, hold the ball into your arm and snap a picture of him, right? It seemed like such a simple business conceptually. And I had been at the top, so to speak. I was one of the glamour boys shooting for the big magazines at Super Bowls. Yeah. And on my second shoot ever, we shot 312 teams and 3,200 individuals at a soccer league. And I literally wanted to die. I said, if there is a God, hit me with the thunderbolt and take me out right now, please. Because I realized that it was a whole different deal. And that there are so many things you have to be good at as a action sports photographer. You really need to be good at taking the pictures. And sorry, but not a whole lot else.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Yeah, there's not that much more to it, really.
Because someone else is editing the work. I mean, you're turning in the images and someone else is...
And if you're shooting for magazines, they're doing the marketing. You're just handling the assignments. And I found out that the photography part of it is a very small part of it.
Right.
And so I started building massive tent complexes. I started one of my, I think, innovations, this idea of doing between 2 and 8 lines with a single photographer and utilizing the strengths of the photographer, not having them wasting time walking back and forth and doing posing or taking money. There was a bunch of things I did that I thought were fairly unique. And I refined the model over time. And now, thanks largely to COVID and having 6 months off where I had to completely redesign the entire model, we can now we'll do Allen High School football, which has 500 athletes and 85 student trainers. We'll do them in 2 hours with 3 people on the staff, whereas I used to have 12 people, and it took me a little longer. So it's been a constant refinement process. A big part of it is realizing that the wheel has not been invented. It may be somewhat of an oval, but it still clunks from time to time. So we're always, after every shoot, saying, okay, what could we have done better? We're asking our customers, what could we have done better? And we're making changes. And as I tell the groups when I speak to them, 90% of what I talk about, I think, is decent information, and 10% of it's crap. I don't know what 10% is off. I believe it all today, and a year from now, I'll be able to look back and say, "Oh man, I missed the mark on that particular thing, whether it be a marketing thing or a technical thing or something that's missing." So it's constantly evolving, and trying to stay ahead of the fact that parents have their own cameras on their phones now, and are more and more likely to take their own pictures, and trying to stay in business has been a challenge.
It's interesting because the competitive landscape has kind of changed. Because back in the day, when you first started, you were competing against the old school photographers, right? You had to get accounts from them. Now you're competing against, mom's camera, right? Or,
absolutely.
Or dad's camera, if you will, or, now you're just the team of sports, are you doing any action as part of your portfolio of offerings for schools? Or because I know a lot of volume photographers who just shy away from doing action completely. They don't want to touch it.
I figured that if I went out with my equipment and my background and did some real nice action pictures of a team that was winning, like on its way to a national title, that I would clean up and make a bunch of money. And that never happened. I just found it wasn't very profitable. And if I didn't have anything else to do, I would have done that because I was making a profit doing that. But when I compared what I was netting per hour relative to working the volume business doing TNI, there's no comparison.
Right.
Now, there are people, hi Mariev, and the people that follow his directions have found a model that works for them. But exclusive of him, with very few exceptions, I don't know that people are making money doing spec action. And Chaim's a great friend of mine, and he is the leader in the spec action. And we've talked about this for a long time. In fact, we all met together, the three of us, at PMA when we were on the committee together, and you did marketing there.
Yeah.
But no, I don't do action. I get requests to do it, and I give them the names of a couple of people in the area that do, and I say, have fun with that. Yeah. But also part of it's a wear and tear thing. I mean, I've had both of my knees and both my hips replaced. Mm-hmm. I've had a couple of heart attacks. So I'm just not as anxious to go out there in the Texas heat and chase kids with a long lens. It just, it's not high on my list of priorities these days.
It's just interesting because it's almost like, again, Chaim, has been on the podcast. He's a friend of the show and all that. I mean, he's a great guy. And I think he's the only person who has a system for making money with action photography, just because the way they do it. But it's interesting when I talk to volume people in the sports and event, they always say, like I said, they'd rather get rid of it. Yet there always seems to be this belief, and I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's because people see Sports Illustrated on the newsstand still or whatever. They still think there's money there, and there's not. There's no money there.
There's not a lot there. I mean, parents can get a nice kid camera with a telephoto lens. They can follow their kid for the entire contest. Most of the kids in games rarely touch the ball, but they're following their kid. Right. And you're there as the spec guy trying to do that. And one of the reasons Chaim does well at this is because they pre-sell, and so they only target those people of pre-purchased. Right. And they're not chasing every kid in the field. They're just chasing the ones that have the colored rubber band on their left ankle. Right. One thing I can add is that I stopped doing action basically in 98, but I came out of retirement last year specifically because I was mentoring a young lady whose goal was to be a team photographer for a pro sports team. So I went back and got some credentials to do some NCAA games, including Deion Sanders' first game at
Colorado.
Here, he was Colorado. And I was very happy to see that I could still get good action pictures. I hadn't lost it totally. And I've noticed that there's a whole new market, and that is with the new NIL stuff. Mm-hmm. There are agents representing the majority of the top athletes in the college level, and they need images. Right. So they can get it from stock photo agencies, but in many cases, they're willing to pay someone like me, at least a partial day rate to go in and follow their athlete at a game, and they can get credentials and they're paying money. So a new market is opening up as NIL is now making these kids pro athletes, and there are NIL deals going on at the high school level now too.
I know, it's crazy. It is crazy. Yeah, that's something I actually hadn't thought about. That may be kind of an extension of the prepaid action model, right? NIL is, again, you're not shooting everybody. It's not on spec. It's people paying for that for that thing. Because it is amazing to me how, like, you see these platforms that have been created where people basically have a sizzle reel of a high school kid has a sizzle reel of their highlights of their things in order to get recruited. So I think this is kind of an exception. There's a whole business model around that sort of thing, where it's the video of them catching a touchdown and everything else, and sort of a, hey, look at me, recruit me kind of thing. It is a very interesting development in the youth sports area. Let's talk a little bit about the mentoring thing. You've mentioned that a couple times, that word mentoring. You had mentors, and you are a mentor. Why is that important to you to be a mentor?
Well, first of all, I just flat out enjoy it. That's just kind of in my heart, just giving and helping. Also, it's kind of my obligation. I remember when I was working with Peter Miller on some billboards for Eastman Kodak leading up to the '84 Olympics. I was in his apartment at 2 a.m, and I got kind of misty-eyed just thinking about how cool it was to be hanging out with Peter in his apartment and painting a hurdle for Edwin Moses to jump over. And I said, Peter, I don't know how I could ever thank you. And he just looked at me deadpan and said, you can't. And then he walked out of the room. And I thought, well, that wasn't much of a hallmark moment. But then he came back and he sat down and he put down his paint can and said, look, years ago, Mark Hoffman and John Zimmerman and Neil Leifer helped me get going. I can never repay them, but they told me the way I repay them is I find people like you and I pass on what they gave me to people like you. And someday, Dave, you're going to go on and you're going to help people and you're going to pass along what you learned from all of us. Mm-hmm. And so it was really cool years later to be on a committee at PPA where I brought in Peter Miller as a speaker. I got to introduce him and I told that story. And he says, well, I think you've repaid it many times over, Dave. And it was a really touching moment for both of us, I think. So I hope my legacy, at least part of it, is that I helped a bunch of people and they went on to help people. And I know that that's happening with people I've mentored in the past. One that comes to mind is Jay Boatwright, who is, I think, probably the top name in the TNI field right now, who came out and spent several days with me, he and his wife, Karina. And in trying to do a brain dump for them, they launched a career and have gone well beyond anything I showed them. And now they're doing these boot camps and helping many. So I get to take a little pride in thinking that I was part of that. Mm-hmm. That floats my boat.
So what do you think there is? Because I've always seen this in the photography world, and I've always thought it was kind of interesting how, for some reason, in the photography world, there seems to be this generosity of spirit of people who don't mind sharing their tips, tricks, and whatever to help the next generation. I'm not sure every industry has that.
I'm sure that's true. And I maybe almost everything I think about right now that I list as strengths came back from what I learned as a high school distance runner. Mm-hmm. And the cool thing about being a cross-country runner, at least in most areas, is that, yeah, you have opponents from other schools you're running against, but really you are all on the same team running against a course, right? Running against the environment. Yeah. And so you have really close relationships with your competitors. And you actually talk to them on the course sometimes before you try to beat them up. Right. And that same type of thing exists in at least our part of the photography world. And part of that attitude is really encouraged by our biggest event, which is SPAC, which is every January in Vegas. But it's SPAC. The whole idea is, hey, let's share. We all benefit through sharing. And people have asked me, why are you willing to go up in front of a group, some of which are competitors in your market, and tell them your so-called secrets? And what I say as a speaker, collectively, I get back more from all the people in that room than I give them. And, the person in the microphone in front of the room is not the only expert by any means.
Sure, of course not.
Part of it is just a matter of you give and you get back.
Sure.
Part of it is just, I think it's a great way to lead your life. And I found that, I've lost accounts in my market to people that I've trained, and it hurts. On the whole, it just feels better than trying to beat everybody up. The thing is, the market's huge, and with few exceptions, there's enough work for all of us if you do a good job. But the key is, you have to be honest. You have to think win-win. You have to do a great job. You have to have customer service. If you do all those things, you're going to be okay. If you're short in any of those areas, in my opinion, and you're struggling, you kind of deserve to struggle because you have control over every one of those things. And your obligation as a professional, as a human being, is to be good in all those areas.
So one of the other areas you participate in is, being a Lumix ambassador and helping them provide products for this market. Now, recently, they've come up with some innovations in that space. Can you talk a little bit about your input in providing insight into that licensing and workflow model, which is really what it is. It's a workflow tool, and that's, what you kind of help with.
Yeah, well, I've been going to SPAC for a long time, and actually I was brought in years ago by John Rack to kind of start up the sports side of that whole complex event. I wear multiple hats. When I'm at SPAC, I'm a photographer trying to find tools and suppliers or whatever that help us collectively. And now, as a representative of ImageQuicks with their software and Richmond Lab with their lab work and Panasonic with the Lumix product line, I'm also trying to represent them and figure out what we can do at those companies to produce a better product so we can earn people's business and their loyalty. With Panasonic, from the very beginning, I could see that they cared about the photographers. I was involved with Canon for many years, and they cared about the glamour boys, the people at Sports Illustrated. They didn't seem to care too much about the volume market.
Right. You can kind of see that by their lack of presence at volume events. I mean, let's be fair. They're not at those events.
Yeah. So they might have a booth there or some equipment, but they're not really connected. They don't really understand us, and they don't need to because they're selling a bunch of gear to other people in other markets.
Right.
The Panasonic, largely because of the guy that I reported to, Tom Curley, very much cared. And so we were constantly asking questions of the other photographers there and the other vendors, exclusive of the camera manufacturers. What can we do? What is it that you're missing? What can we do? And a lot of it was, to create the ability to put masks into the cameras themselves, as opposed to having them etched onto an interchangeable piece of plastic. What can we do in the workflow as far as tethering and capture, and now the use of barcodes, where we're able to take pictures of a student and have their data put directly in the EXIF information in the header of each individual image, which is a huge thing that no one in the industry has been able to do for 20 years. Fuji did it 20 years ago, and then the camera disappeared. So we're doing that now. We're now sending the images directly to the Adobe Cloud as we capture them, which the video guys are very excited about. The still guys haven't latched on to what that means for them yet. And we've got some other things that we'll soon I'll be able to talk about, which are even more exciting than anything I just discussed. But we've very much been chasing that. And unfortunately, there's a long period of time that goes between producing the white paper and convincing the bean counters in Japan the ROI is there, because the conversation is always, well, how many are we going to sell? And my answer is, I don't know. And they say, well, we're not going to take the risk. And they say, you've got to do it. And then you see how many we sell. And they go, well, we need contracts in advance. I go, no one's going to buy a camera they haven't seen hasn't been developed. So that's an ongoing debate.
Oh, sure. Oh, absolutely.
In marketing. And it's a frustration for us at our end in North America, because the people in North America with Panasonic and myself as an ambassador, we all understand the opportunities there. And we know that we could own this market if we did certain things, but we answer to people in Japan.
Yeah. And that's always, that's not a thing specific to Panasonic as a company, right? I mean, you always have people who are, you want things that customers ask for, right? Like the masking, that you want that feature because people are asking for it, they want it, but how many more units are they going to buy? You don't know. It may be more, it may be less. You have no idea. It could be a pleasant surprise, right?
Well, the other problem is that we have to put together reports after each trade show, and it says, how many did you sell? Mm-hmm. We didn't sell any. There was no retailer there. We spent X amount of thousands of dollars on this event and we didn't sell anything. Mm-hmm. No, we educate, we show people. They go out later and they buy sometimes thousands of cameras because of something a conversation we had at SPAC or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's another set of battles we're going through is how do we quantify our sales? We can't empirically prove what our success rate is. We just have anecdotal evidence.
Yeah. And that's hard for a data-driven organization, which most of the Japanese companies are, right? I mean, they very much like the spreadsheets. They like the numbers and columns all lining up, and you can't do it because it is subjective. And actually, I think that problem is going to get even worse, because in marketing today, people are absorbing all kinds of messages all the time, and they're making decisions and they're always looking for a better deal. So let's say, for example, I go to a show and I see the Lumix G9 or something. I may not buy it there. I may buy it 2 weeks later or through a promotion or something. Now, but I got the idea at that event. But how do you track that?
Exactly. It's frustrating, but initially the big challenge years ago, because I started with Lumix in 2014, was people didn't know what a mirrorless camera was.
Oh yeah.
So there's education, and then they started understanding the advantages of mirrorless. Then it was, why buy our camera? And they didn't understand micro four thirds format, which is unique to us and what used to be known as Olympus on OM system. The built-in skepticism at how can a small sensor produce the quality we're looking for. So we would show them blow-ups from that very small sensor and blow their mind. You can get incredible stuff from Micro Four Thirds sensor. I've always believed that you don't need to be good at sales if you're good at education and you represent the best product or the answer. Mm-hmm. And the Panasonic cameras aren't the answer for everyone, but I believe with all my heart that it is the answer in most situations for the volume market. And that's why I bought 4 cameras and 10 lenses before I even knew they had an ambassador team.
So you were on the team before you were on the team is what you were saying.
Well, yeah, the bean counters, I'm sure they asked Tom Curley, do you think he's out of money? Is he stopped buying stuff? And when he said, yeah, he said, tell him about the ambassador team. Because when you're on the ambassador team, you get free cameras and half-price cameras and stuff, but they already had all my money. So one of the things I'm very proud of is being part of the Lumix ambassador team is not all ambassador teams are made up of people who are users first, who are loyal to the brand and use it.
Right.
Sometimes it's more of a free agent type thing. It's like, and I've had offers from other companies, well, you don't use our product, we'll give you a bunch of free product and you can be on our ambassador team if you use our product and we'll give it to you. And I said, well, no, because I don't use your product and I don't necessarily think it's best.
Right.
So I'll continue to use Lumix as long as I think it's the best thing for what I do.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, listen, Davis, this has been great. Where can people go for more information to learn more about where you may be speaking or Team DSP?
Well, I would suggest that you follow the SPAC website and their Facebook page. Just if you're in a volume market, you need to be at SPAC each year. There are other big events for volume photography. There's the MVP gathering, which is specifically aimed at users of Image Quicks and Lumix products. But you can go there if you don't use either. And I do believe that you should be looking at those products if you're not using them, because I think they are the leaders in the volume industry. As far as what I'm doing, my website absolutely sucks. I've never got around to doing anything with it because I've been busier than I want to be for a long time. So I've had the blessings of being busy, and I haven't needed to be any good at marketing.
Yeah.
So I'm embarrassed by it, but it's a testimony to what a dedication to customer service and quality and value can do for you. It's kind of a back-asswards way of doing it. But you can always call and write. You can send me a friend request on Facebook. I treat Facebook kind of like a blog. Mm-hmm. I've been paying for a blog for years and I haven't used it. So I hope to have some time soon to get into that, because I'm ramping down my T&I part of my business. So I have time to be more of a consultant and an educator, because that's really what I enjoy. And I think that's where I could do the most good.
So do not, under any circumstances, go to teamdsp.com. Do not go there. Any listeners, don't go there. That's what you're saying.
Go there for an example of a bunch of placeholders of the Golden Gate Bridge I put in there 10 years ago and have not updated. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's great to see you. Hopefully we'll see you at industry and events soon. I usually see you everywhere. So it's great to see you.
Great.
Take care. Good to see you again.
Thanks a lot, Gary. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.